From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for watching. Looking forward to Megyn Kelly joining us tonight, being a Wednesday night and a lot of debate. But first, my observations on the day, including as people start to put together what their financial future is going to look like, the Reserve Bank's decision yesterday to increase interest rates for the 13th time, 12 under the Albanese government, the Albo dozen. The costs are mounting up. As I said in some detail last night, but isn't it amazing how quickly the media wants to move on? If you have a $500,000 loan, you now have to find an extra $13,440 a year compared to when the rates started going up and supercharged under this government. The Albo dozen plus the one before, $750,000 loan, you need an extra $21,000 a year. This is on top of what you were already paying, while cost of living and all of the other bills are going through the roof, while you might be trying to pay off insurance on your house, which has gone up through the roof, let alone the power bills as well. And $1 million loan, which sadly is too regular for too many people who want to live in the major cities, they have to find an extra $29,000 a year to be able to stay in their home. Oh, but don't worry, the Prime Minister feels your pain. As you know, he is right at the coalface of talking all day, every day, about how his government can do something about the cost of living. Like, no doubt this came up at the White House while he was on a date night and clinking glasses of champagne. No doubt this got a mention in his pump and dump chat in China. And while this bloke is strutting on the world stage and being ever so applauded by the media, and I'll get to some of that garbage in a second, there is more data that comes out today about just the specific number of Australians who, as a result of this interest rate rise and the dozen before it, are now starting to hurt. Let's look at three states, the three most populous states in the country. First, in New South Wales. The city of Blacktown, the local government area of Blacktown, with obviously Blacktown as its heart, but many other suburbs inside it. According to analysis from Digital Financial Analytics, have a look at this. Of the 59,000 people with a mortgage in Blacktown, as a result of the Albo dozen, 51,000 of those people are now under financial stress. Financial stress means when you have to pay more than a third of all of the money that you have on trying to pay off your house. Lake Macquarie, 29,000 of the 55,000 are in mortgage stress. Fairfield, 28,000. 27,961 people who have a mortgage in Campbelltown, which is 28,180 of them. So almost everyone with a mortgage in Campbelltown is hurting right now. In the Hills Shire, 25,000 people are under mortgage stress. In Canterbury, it's 20,000. Camden, 20,000. Liverpool, 19 of the 22,000. Wollongong, 19 of the 30,000 people with a loan. Or Cessnock, 17,000 of the 23,000. Or may I put that into some language that the Prime Minister, political apparatchiks and the people who talk about politics for a living may understand. Chifley, Greenway, McMahon, Lake Macquarie, Hunter, Fowler, Fairfield, McMahon, Campbelltown, Macarthur, Hills Shire and Borkham Hills. They are all federal seats in the Australian Parliament. If you think that the people who almost all of the people in those areas like Blacktown and that local government area or Campbelltown are going to keep voting for Labor, well, you've got another thing coming. In Victoria, the number one location of mortgage stress right now is Casey, the local government area there. In federal electorate terms, that's Casey or Bruce. Then places like Hume, Indi, Whittlesea, McEwen, Wyndham, Layla, Carnley and Fraser. Have a look at these numbers. In Casey, 44,000 of the 71,000 people with a mortgage are in trouble. In Hume, it's 30,000, 27 of 36,000 people in Whittlesea, half of the people in Wyndham, 25,000 of the 41,000 in Brimbank, 24 of 28,000 in that local government area beneath it. I won't mispronounce it, I apologise. And it goes on and on and on. In Queensland, Brisbane, which of course is one of the biggest local government areas in the country, it covers all of essentially the capital city that is Brisbane. More than half of everyone with a mortgage in Brisbane is now in financial stress after an Albo dozen of interest rate rises. 114,000 of 204,000 people. Again, you can see Logan, Moreton Bay, the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, Toowoomba, Ipswich, Redland, Cairns and Townsville. What about in Ipswich? 20,000 of the 29,000 people with a mortgage are now in financial trouble. May I spell that out for the political people? The city, or I should say rather, the electorates of Brisbane, Longman, Moncrieff, Wide Bay and Groom. All of them are hurting right now. Those are the people who, when they hear about cost of living on this show every night, when they see the inflation figures every month, when they see the government doing 4/5 of bugger all about it, they are frightened because there is no extra money. They're not getting pay rises, and that's not because their bosses are evil, but pay rises can't produce a random up to $30,000 on top of what you already had this time last year. The economy just doesn't work like that. The only people who assume it works like that are public servants who are guaranteed to always get a pay rise, or politicians who never forget, while you've had an Albo dozen of interest rate rises, they have got their highest pay rise in 10 years. And as for the great passenger that is the Treasurer of Australia, Grim Jim Chalmers, there he was yesterday, out and about, saying, I feel your pain, I understand, turning up for the softest of soft home ground interviews on the ABC last night. Well, with that many people in that much stress, you'd think he might back up again today. But guess what? Nothing. Tumbleweeds. Nowhere. No sign of this bloke today. No follow-up, and no one in the political media saying, where is the Treasurer? How many areas have I just told you where almost everyone with a mortgage is in trouble, or well and truly more than half of all of the people in those areas are in mortgage trouble right now as a result of inflation that is out of control because this government makes it worse. They continue the immigration policy, which is good for the federal budget but bad for the people. They're going to turn around and cut infrastructure spending but still add more people. And yes, they are refusing to cut petrol. It's more than $2 virtually everywhere in the country. 25 cents could be cut tomorrow. It costs $3 billion. They've got a $20 billion surplus. And what was it that Jim Chalmers said when he was thundering when it was just one interest rate rise, but he wasn't the bloke in charge?
When things are going well in the economy, he takes all of the credit. And when times are tough in the economy, he takes none of the responsibility.
Well, since that comment, under his leadership, under his control, Australian households have put up with a dozen further interest rate rises. Yet he has the arrogance to disappear the day after people are starting to soak up the information. And sadly, it looks like the interest rate rises are not over. The Reserve Bank and one of its former board members spoke today to the Australian Financial Review and says that rates need to go up 3 more times. This person believes that there has to be a 5% cash rate, higher obviously when it comes to what you have to pay when you're dealing with a bank or a mortgage broker. But currently rates are at 4.35%. If we have to get to 5% and they do it 0.25, and then what's left over, that's 3 more interest rate rises. How are you feeling under Albonomics? With the Prime Minister swans around for free, his mates on the backbench get the biggest pay rise they've got in 10 years. Everyone connected to the union movement is loving what they're doing to the Australian economy. The Australian dollar is down by more than 10 cents, which means everything we import to the country costs more, and he won't spend a cent to do anything about your petrol. But they're trying to spin that they've got $26 billion worth of cost of living relief, and this has resulted in 0.5% of inflation being reduced. Well, fantastic, pal. We're at the best part of 5.5%. The Reserve Bank needs to bash it down to between 2 and 3%. So you can find another $3 billion, reduce petrol, which is one of the things that they calculate inflation on, because inflation on petrol is up 20% in the past month, 15% the month before that. Honestly, this bloke. But of course, no questions today for the Prime Minister because he's overseas. Oh, he made a passing comment and then bolted in China, but now he's at the Pacific Islands Forum. Another opportunity to hand out taxpayer cash to make sure that China doesn't take over these places, but I'll tell you some detail in a second about how China's already doing it. He's been the little boy in terms of the relationship with the United States, the fawning little boy in terms of the relationship with China. Well, now he gets to be the big man with the Pacific Islands Forum. Did he say anything today about interest rates and mortgage stress where places like Campbelltown, where almost everyone with a mortgage is now in financial trouble? No, nothing, zero, zip. Media, fine by us. Extraordinary. Can we play that grab of Chalmers again? What did he have to say when they were in full force attack against the former Prime Minister, against the evil Liberal government that you had to get rid of, when petrol was lower, when interest rates were lower and mortgage stress virtually didn't exist in Australia? What was it that Chalmers said? Because now it applies a dozen times over to him and Albo.
When things are going well in the economy, he takes all of the credit. And when times are tough in the economy, he takes none of the responsibility.
These people, seriously. Now, we know that over the past month or so, racial taunts, racial violence has started to tick up in Australia. The government's response has been to not talk about one half of the equation. Instead, literally people inside the federal government talking about Islamophobia, when the reality is that no one is screaming anything like gas the Jews towards that population. And if they did, I'd be just as angry about what happened to the Jewish community as what would happen to them. But there's no sign of it right now. But the reality is, when the Opera House was under attack from people who decided to flood the zone because the monument was being lit up in the colours of Israel. This, of course, remember, was a unapproved gathering. A couple of people have been arrested around it, good. A couple of people are going through the courts now, even better. But the organisers who put it in place should have got a $22,000 fine and they've got nothing. But things are starting to get even worse. And forgive me, this is distressing content. Some people are now using graffiti on road signs to send their message to the Jewish community. Not just the stuff that you see as people march around in the United States and the UK, but also as they march around here saying the only place for the Jews to go is in the bin, which means dead. Well, tonight my colleague Sharry Markson had a story that virtually no one else in the media is covering tonight, and I don't know why. It's a story of a man who claims to have been attacked because he is Jewish and beaten heavily. Here is Sharry explaining as she did tonight at 5 o'clock.
The Jewish man was at a children's playground in Arncliffe in Sydney's Inner West on Saturday, October 28. He saw a poster advertising a Palestinian rally that was half torn down. He tore the rest of it down. It was past the event's date. But a father at the children's playground saw him do this, came up to him, asked if he supported Israel, and started threatening him. He said to him, and I quote, "I will murder you." The Jewish man immediately rang police, but they didn't turn up in time. He'd been on the way to a friend's place when this all unfolded. He didn't have his car with him. A crowd of pro-Palestinian men and women gathered around him, yelling slurs and insults. He was completely outnumbered. As he was surrounded by the shouting group, he felt a knock to the back of his head. He immediately fell to the ground. As he lay there, unable to move, 3 big men pummeled him, taking turns punching and kicking him. He says he took at least 12 punches to the head.
Now, none of this is about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. This is about intimidating someone because of whom they are and physically assaulting. Listen to what was being said as it happened.
As the men attacked him, they said, and I quote, "Why are you in our area? Go back to Vaucluse." And they called him a pro-Jew dog, among other awful insults.
Now, to make this very clear, this is not a random email that we've received and we are uncritically repeating it. Shari and her team worked today to get this confirmed with police. Police confirmed via this statement to Shari's program that at about 6:30 p.m. on that said date, officers attached to the St George Police Area Command were called to Belmore Street near Wollongong Road, Arncliffe, following reports of an assault. Ambulance paramedics treated a 44-year-old man for facial injuries after he was allegedly assaulted by 3 men after he had removed a poster from a pole. Now, you've heard a little more detail about whom the person is, what the poster was. He was taken to St Vincent's Hospital, stable condition. Anyone, any information, dashcam footage or any other insight, call Crime Stoppers, 1800 333 000. Now, I've saved you the detail of telling you who from the New South Wales Police confirmed that, but that has now been confirmed as something that the police are investigating. Now, you can be very level-handed, you can be two-sided, you can be completely aware of everything that, as I say, is happening in the humanitarian situation in Gaza. This is not on. This is not acceptable, and too few people in our government are calling this out. Another perfect example, the hate preachers. The hate preachers that you've seen on the news up and down the east coast of Australia over the past few days. Vile, horrific, disgusting things that they have been saying. Again, if anyone was saying this about an Islamic person, I'd say exactly the same thing, but they're not. These people are shameless, they are hateful, and they are posting this stuff online. Now, the minister responsible for dealing with things like radicalisation is the Home Affairs Minister. Her name is Claire O'Neill. Now, Claire O'Neill is in charge of, as the Chief Minister, the Federal Police, ASIO and Border Force. So if somebody should be deported from the country, that's Border Force. If it's somebody who is threatening violence, that's ASIO. And the Federal Police can help them investigate it. Yet we have heard nothing, zero, duck egg, 4/5, bugger all from this minister. Literally not a word about these hate preachers. What is being done to investigate them? What is being done to deport them if we can? What is being done to de-radicalise anyone who is agreeing with this? Now, these people are posting it on the internet. If they're posting it on the internet, imagine what's happening behind even further closed doors. But when they are leading with their chin and posting it online, where is anyone from ASIO, the Federal Police, Border Force or the minister responsible for it coming out to say, we are watching you, knock it off, stop, not in our country? Instead, nothing. Nothing from any of these agencies. And I'm going after the brass and the minister responsible, not the men and women on the front line of all three of those great security services. But this is not a shy wallflower in Claire O'Neill. She has literally spent more time talking about Donald Trump Jr., his visa and his plans to come to Australia at one point in time than she has about what the hell are they doing about the hate preachers. Why is no one following up? Why is no one demanding the interview? Why is no one saying to any of these agencies or her, what are you doing? Because this is happening in our country and we have the videos to prove it. Meantime, again, the response of the brass in the New South Wales government and the brass of the New South Wales Police Force. Back to what happened at the Opera House. Now, while there are many who want to say, move on, nothing to see here, it was just a few people Change the subject. Firstly, $22,000 fine for the people who organised the rally. It was never approved. It started at Town Hall. It took 30 minutes to get to the Opera House. The people should have been fined, yet nothing has happened. But we learned via a studious inquiry that's happening in the New South Wales Upper House about what police actually knew. And it is frightening that they did nothing about the rally that made its way to images of hate around the world. We learn via the Daily Telegraph, James O'Doherty, the reporter who was sitting there watching, listening to it all. New South Wales Police knew that people were likely to bring flares to a pro-Palestine rally at the Sydney Opera House. Now remember, it was never meant to be at the Opera House. It was only ever meant to be at Town Hall. Anyone bringing flares was planning to leave the Town Hall. It continues here. They were told that members of the Jewish community planned to gather at the forecourt to commemorate the October 7 attacks. So this was a very deliberate attempt to confront people who 2 days earlier were dealing with what Hamas had done in Israel. These are not people who care about the civilians of Gaza. These are the people who cheer the actions of Hamas. A flurry of emails over the weekend showed that New South Wales Police had been monitoring the proposed pro-Palestinian protest days before it occurred. So hang on, they knew the plan for the protest, yet they didn't bust it up when it was at Town Hall. They knew the plan for the protest, but they didn't stop people when they were marching through the heart of Sydney for 30 minutes. They knew people were coming with flares and bad intentions, but they didn't stop them doing it. Imagine the same thing for the Sydney cricket ground or a football final. Oh, well, we know something bad happened, but it's okay. We knew about it before it happened. You'd stop them, wouldn't you? You would need to seed them. You would send the message, we are watching. But just like the hate preachers, oh, well, we were watching, but we didn't do anything. Intelligence gathered by police revealed that people had been urged to attend the Opera House with flags, flares and drums. Now, nothing wrong about a drum or a flag, but a flare is illegal. It's a weapon. They knew it was happening, but who did they search? Who did they stop? No one. In another chain of emails, someone from outside the New South Wales Police organisation advised senior police that a pro-Israel counter-protest had been organised for the Town Hall at the same time as a Palestinian rally. Well, guess what happened then? Rather than shooing off the people cheering on Hamas, they shoot off the Jews. That's what they did. Later, a police employee said that the pro-Israel rally had been cancelled. They shoot off the Jews, but they let the pro-Hamas people march through the streets of Sydney, knowing they had flares, knowing they were going to confront whoever was there in the Jewish community because 1,400 of their citizens have been butchered by Hamas. I repeat, for the 7th time. This is not about the civilian death toll in Gaza. This is not about the electricity, the internet, the water, the desalination plant. These are the people who decided to cheer on the actions of Hamas days after they did it. Days after they did it, and well and truly before Israel decided to respond. Now, there was also, remember this bloke, who was the acting commissioner or the person responsible because the commissioner was apparently off on holidays, fine, fair enough. But this was the bloke who, after his officers knew it was happening, refused to search anyone, didn't bust it up and let them march to the Opera House, said this.
We can't stop 1,000 people meeting in one spot. It depends on their behaviour once they get there.
Well, guess what? And I'm sure he's a decent man, but on this one, fail. Huge fail. And I repeat, this is not about the men and women of the police force, the border force or ASIO. This is not the people whose job it is to look into this stuff or the people who knew it was coming. It's the people who choose to do nothing about it. Why? Are they afraid what the reaction will be? The only way Australia can stop people believing that they can march for Hamas or scream to kill the Jews is for people to know it's not on. It's not okay. It is not acceptable. It is a criminal offence. Well, that bloke turned up again at the Upper House inquiry in New South Wales. He told the Budget Estimates hearing on Tuesday that police did not attempt to block the protest from moving to Town Hall because it could have got out of hand. So rather than policing the crowd, breaking it up, they might act up. They might take a couple of swings. They might break some windows of some handbag shops on George Street. You are kidding me. The New South Wales Police has the capacity to break up a riot, doesn't it? Now, at Town Hall, it wasn't a riot, but it could have been kept at Town Hall by police creating a square and they don't move. But that didn't happen. They could have used extra officers to make sure they got nowhere near the Opera House, but they didn't. And they could have used their tremendous powers they had during COVID to search people for flares coming in cars, buses or trains. Nothing from the police brass on that event. Again, I'm glad some people have been charged, but that's post-haste. In the meantime, the message that has gone to the Jewish community of Australia is because you won't act up, because you won't blow up, because you won't hit an officer, because you won't smash a window in, you're the one that's got to turn and scarper. Meantime, we'll just work out where these other people can go. Again, I am not talking about peaceful protest. I'm not talking about people who love their family in Gaza. I am talking about the people in our community, revved up by hate preachers, radicalised by the internet, who end up cheering on the actions of Hamas. Where is the federal government on this? Prime Minister, nothing. No questions. He's overseas. Sorry, he's the good-looking boy in China. What garbage. The minister responsible. She's out there like a flash to have a go at a data hack. Nothing about this. It is outrageous. It truly is. And while I'm at it, what about the CEO of Optus, fair dinkum? As you know, multiple hours, millions of people not able to use their phone or their internet, and people blew up Deluxe today as they should.
I've had to turn back about 10 customers today. And it's just something that I've never experienced in my lifetime.
It's one big hiccup we didn't need this morning.
I couldn't make the meeting this morning. It was supposed to be an online meeting, so I had to come into the office today for it.
In a way, I'm relieved it's not just me.
No, I'm switching to Vodafone.
Oh, dear God, I had to come into the office today. Now, look, let's be very clear. As we know, things go wrong. That's why your plane sometimes doesn't take off. That's why your computer sometimes doesn't work. Systems sometimes will break down. OK? We will learn eventually whether they have spent enough or not spent enough on making sure that they have redundancies and backups. But the CEO of Optus, the one who already stuffed up the way that they dealt with the data hack, you would have thought she learnt by now about crisis communication. Well, she said nothing. The thing started at 4 a.m. I understand her first interview today was in the middle of the day, about lunchtime, midday. And have a listen to this garbage. When asked the question, hey, what's going on? Rather than saying, I don't know, how's this for corporate rubbish?
We don't have line of sight into the root cause.
We don't have line of sight into the root cause. What about I don't know? And why did that have to wait for 6 hours? Again, what about this one as well? When literally, Melbourne's transport system, hospitals, let alone small businesses, they were all going through what they were going through. This is what she said in defence of her own company on the day things stuffed up.
Well, we provide a service to our customers 24/7, and our service is extremely reliable. It's great value.
Well, it's not now.
We offer a lot, and these sorts of outages are extremely unusual, but they do happen to every telco.
Literally, reading the script, just throw some garbage. Now, again, things go wrong. And yes, it's very inconvenient when it's about telecommunications. But here's what the CEO should have said at 5 o'clock this morning. And then at the 10 a.m. briefing, the midday briefing, the 2 p.m. briefing, the 4 p.m. briefing. I'm sorry. We're doing our best to fix it. And next month's bill is on us. More in a sec here on Paul Murray Live. We're fired up tonight, as you can tell. We'll get into the debate in a second, then Megyn Kelly here on a big Wednesday night on Sky News. Thanks for watching. All right, big one ahead here. Keith Pitt joining us, of course, from Queensland. He's always as fired up as I am. And, well, he's well dressed here, fresh from the News Awards.
I am indeed. How are you? Never let it be said. I usually only wear this outfit when I'm representing myself in court.
Well, I hope you were successful. Congrats to all of the winners.
That haven't happened.
Yeah, we got a little bit of one of the trophies for the stuff that we've done about youth crime in Queensland. But congrats to everyone who's nominated and the great work in our company. All right, let's talk here about rates. Joe, yep. I know you were running towards the studio. I won't relive it all for you. Yep. But the Albo doesn't have interest rate rises. Yeah. And I went through all of those areas, right, which are now starting to get to literally almost everyone with a mortgage in a place like Campbelltown is now in financial stress. And then former Reserve Bank board member says to the Financial Review, no, you need 3 more. We need to get this thing to 5%. We'll all see what happens here. But that's why I am obsessed with the inflation conversation, right? And that's why I keep going on about petrol. That's why
huge.
I keep talking.
Huge. That's right, yeah.
Is it because these things, we're now hitting this point where it can't just keep rolling on, because until it starts going down, the bank's going to keep hitting back.
Yeah, there's been some really interesting commentary about this and stuff I think that is very sobering and should be compulsory reading for most people. There's a really good piece by my doppelganger at the telly, John Rolfe, who dresses like this every day.
He does.
And he said the problem is that the RBA keeps raising rates to crush inflation, when in fact it's not spending that is driving inflation up. In fact, the services and goods inflation number came down in that last quarter that the RBA was so worried about, but the petrol prices, which are so incredibly high because of overseas events, overwhelmingly by OPEC and the war in Ukraine, et cetera, now another war, of course, in Gaza, is driving absolutely everything up. So you take petrol out of the equation, everything's actually much better.
Well, except for power, which is
and then there's power as well, but the government is providing relief to power, so it's doing that. But so the problem is that you've got an RBA that has to be seen to be doing something, that has to look like it's in control. The only thing it can do really is raise rates, but raising rates isn't actually solving what is causing the inflation. And that's the thing. We suffer on this kind of Pyrrhic pyre where it's not actually doing any good.
Well, so again, Keith, it was wrong of Labor to overly personalise what was cyclical, but that's what they did, right? They put forward in sort of electoral and political greed that this is a problem, we're going to solve it. They can now turn around and say, oh, we're spending $26 billion and that's going to reduce inflation by 0.5%. Well, guess what? There's still 5 and a bit to go, right? That's before there's zero inflation, but then you can we've got to get down to 3 to 2. There's still a lot of money to go in terms of that cost of living. Let's talk about fuel tax. I bang on about it every night because it's one of those things that will not be inflationary, that if they take $3 billion off the $20 billion they've got in the surplus, they drop it by 25 cents for 6 months, and then we'll see what happens with the world oil price. If they've got to do it again, they've still got money in the surplus. This is the automatic thing they have to do to show they get it.
Paul, I've got a list. It's a long one. I hate to burst Joe's bubble, but here's the reality. Yep, they can do something on fuel prices, but guess what they did do? In the last budget, they put up the heavy vehicle fuel charge. Correct. So it's actually increased the cost of diesel for delivering food and everything that gets moved on logistics. They've spent an extra $180 billion in the budget, the most recent one. They've got $40 billion thrown at wind and solar projects, which everyone says that I've seen who know what they're doing, it's going to be more than $1 trillion. And yet they're talking about cutting infrastructure projects in places like the Bruce Highway. Well, can I tell you what? Budget's about making choices. And if you want to cut back inflation, I've got a pretty good list to pick from. And making it even riskier to drive on the Bruce Highway is not on the list. Good point. Because it's our people that are getting killed, right? It's not the people of Sydney and Melbourne, it's us. So I think Labor needs to have a good, hard look at themselves. And this idea that their spending doesn't have an inflationary impact is just outright wrong. So there's things that can be done. And right now, cost of living is everything. People can't afford to live. And that latest hammer blow from the Reserve Bank on interest rates, that's made it worse.
An Albo dozen, mate. An Albo dozen of them. That's what's happened all in their watch. Chalmers, when it was one, oh, he takes all the credit. It's exactly what they're doing right now. And people notice, right? I know all the professional political people think, oh, no one notices, no one sees it, no one's watching it as granular. Guess what? They can see it, all right? And you can tell me every possible reason why you've got to go to Pacific Islands. I can tell you what normal people see, and normal people see the python getting tighter.
Red carpets.
Right? Exactly. Pay attention to it. But, you know, they obviously think that, you know, the ABC and Twitter will save them. But Joe wrote a great column about that, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, let's talk about Optus. Keith, again, look, systems go wrong. It's terrible. It's inconvenient. All of us, of course, live a digital life. Most people now don't pay with cash. I understand the consequences here. But the CEO of Optus, how hard is it to say, I don't know, we're fixing it, next month's bill is free? I mean, how hard is this?
This is Media 101. Whether it's an emergency, whether it's a police situation, whether it's a major outage like this that affects so many people, you walk up to a microphone, you say, this is what's happened, this is who's affected, this is what we're doing about it, these are the updates that we'll give, and we're going to sort it out as soon as we possibly can, and then you give another update in an hour or 2 hours. It's just really standard practice. So I don't think they'll be saying yes to Optus for much longer. They'll be saying no. And I just feel for all those individuals who have lost a day's trading off their FPOS machines, who are trying hard to keep people employed and now don't have the money to pay them.
Well, and also, it's one of those
In their defence, they did send an email and an SMS message to every single person, but of course they couldn't get it because it wasn't service.
It's maddening. I mean, like again, I get it that the system breaks down, right? And there's something as consequential as this.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, God love the Greens running around. We're going to have an inquiry. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
Seriously, what are you going to do? All right. Now, you wrote an excellent piece about how Labor needs to ignore Twitter.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
They need to listen to good people like yourself and maybe even hate watch shows like this.
Yes, absolutely, they should, and they should love watch shows like this because it represents something that they don't get often, and that is a diversity of opinion. Yes. They actually will understand, and I think we saw this during the Voice campaign, may it rest in peace, where these people clearly just did not know how to talk to Conservatives. In fact, their message towards the end was that if you're undecided or thinking of voting no, you're an idiot and you're stupid and you're racist. And again, it was clear that they just never actually met anyone. I had someone come up to me in the supermarket just yesterday and just say, like, you know, I still keep all your columns on The Voice because I'm just hoping that people will actually get it.
So what's the reaction to this, though? I mean, do you get a text message from lefties going, actually, I think you got a point, or is it all the right?
No, I think everyone, I mean, certainly everyone in the kind of right of the Labor Party, which is most of New South Wales and sadly only about 49% of the rest of the country, gets it and knows that. But it's much easier to be really simplistic and outraged and angry or preachy about an issue on social media and get all the likes from the lovies and get all your retweets and think that you're making a real difference than it is to actually say, well, actually, no, here we need to stop and reflect community attitudes instead of dictating them, and that's been a real problem. I made the point that socialism is the brainchild of and plaything of the extremely rich. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels were extremely rich people. Karl Marx's father was a lawyer who owned lots of vineyards. Engels was a lawyer who was a businessman, industrialist who owned lots of factories. And these people study poor people. They study the working class like kind of lab rats, like animals in a zoo. And they don't actually listen to what people in the working class or poor people want, which is not for everyone else to be poor or everyone to be like them. It is for them to be able to get ahead. And often they're thinking more about them and their family and their kids getting ahead than they are about the entire proletariat.
And also, the thing is, Keith, right, like Australia is always a more modern country than it was last year, the year before, the decade before, 2 decades before, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. We meet different people, we go to different places. That's the joy, right? But people need to understand who are sitting at this super progressive, you know, lean in, let's sort of live the news cycle where we wake up and are shocked by what Donald Trump did and then we're outraged by what Boris Johnson did and then all of this garbage, that Australians are also deeply practical. They also see when somebody's BSing to them and trying to tell them that the country that is pretty damn awesome ain't that good.
Oh, Paul, firstly, all my dreams have come true. I was hoping to hear Joe Hildebrand on the Joe Hildebrand editorial extolling the virtues of Joe Hildebrand, and it's happened. That's just fantastic.
It's the trifecta, Keith. If you didn't get it on the Melbourne Cup, you've got it here tonight.
That's exactly right.
I'm with Joe. Yeah,
we got it now. So, Joe, listen closely, mate. You won't hear this often, but I actually agree with you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Your piece is about 10 years too late. The Australian Labor Party, they haven't represented working people for 10 years or more. They just don't get it. They are all about the rich socialists and the inner city Greens and all the things that most Australians, to be honest, don't care about. They just want to be able to pay their bills. They want a government that listens to them, that acts in their interests.
Correct.
And we're not seeing that from this Labor government. They talk a lot, but it's about their actual actions.
To be fair, I think we've
got to go ideology.
Sorry, gang, I've got to go because Megyn Kelly's standing by. Thank you, lads. Talk to you all again very soon. Back to the awards. All right, plenty more here. Megyn Kelly next. Highlight of our week is to be able to bring you our chat with Megyn Kelly. We begin by having a conversation. Slow down, Paul. About a new New York Times poll that shows that Donald Trump looks like he's storming most of the battleground states, and if all that happens, he wins big.
If that's the case, he would have a 300 electoral vote win. You only need 270 to win. It would be an absolute landslide. And all those states, the 5 of the 6 critical swing states, Joe Biden won in 2020. So this is a complete swing the other way towards Trump, where now he's beating Biden by up to 10 points, 6 points, 5 points, 4 points in these states that Biden won just a few years ago. The enormous swing in Trump's favor is undeniable, and Democrats should be deeply concerned. This is as close to a 5-alarm fire as you can get in electoral politics. Their only comfort right now is, well, those same voters said that if Trump actually gets convicted of a crime before Election Day, that might change their vote. Okay, first of all, we'll see. We don't know whether that's true at all, because for 8 years now, we've had if it could just, then Trump would, if he would just, then Trump would definitely, and he never does go away, right? So don't put a lot of stock in that. And secondly, what we're seeing in these polls is the more they throw at him, the stronger he gets. So I'm actually not even sure that, whereas normally they wouldn't vote against a convicted felon, that rule is going to apply necessarily if it actually happens to Trump. Anyway, the numbers are absolutely devastating, to the point where David Axelrod, the guy who got Barack Obama elected twice, came out explicitly in writing on X talking about how it is time for Joe Biden to step aside. He's got to do the soul searching. He has to have private conversations in the residence of the White House with Jill Biden and talk about whether he is doing this for his ego or for the country, because he doesn't want his legacy to be handing the White House back to Donald Trump.
What is extraordinary, again, inside the polls, and there's polls within the polls and data within the polls, and it's been fascinating to watch Democrats try to find the way to say, oh, all of this doesn't really count. And particularly on MSNBC, they have gone nuts about this, the result when it comes to the economy. That, well, the economy's doing okay and President Biden's doing great and Bidenomics works. The reality is that, as you know, this poll says that a huge number of Americans say that Biden's policies have directly hurt them. So you've got this idea of sort of the people who've got a shed load of money talking on television, who sit back and talk about everything at the macro level, but the micro level where normal people live, they say, you know what, I hated the tweets, I couldn't stand a lot of the crazy, but I had a better life under the orange man.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Biden is out there calling it Bidenomics. It's just like the American dream. And everyone is sitting at home, not being able to afford a gallon of milk, saying, it doesn't feel like the American dream. Why do I feel so bad if things are going so well? So it's some 17% of the electorate says they feel the change negatively under Joe Biden economically. And some 18% said they felt it positively under President Trump. So it's an exact, opposite swing of voters who say, this guy stinks, this guy made my life better. And that's why Trump is beating Biden when it comes to the economy by a margin of 59 to 37. Voters trust Trump over Biden on the economy, and it's not going to change. By the way, the epilogue to that is nearly 2 times as many voters say that economic issues will determine their vote versus social issues. So it's the number one issue for voters, and Trump is winning by a 20-point margin.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch as the media will try to shift the conversation back to democracy and abortion, democracy and abortion, democracy and abortion, because they're the only 2 issues that the Democrats currently lead on. What about the protests at the front of the White House, where I cannot believe it, but Muslim Americans are yelling God is great in a fashion that they would in the worst parts of the most terror-riddled parts of the Middle East? They were doing it out the front of the White House.
They just did it to the Statue of Liberty.
Wow.
I'm sorry, but you don't touch the Statue of Liberty in the United States. You don't touch it. Everybody understands that. These people are derelicts. They're misinformed. They are obviously anti-Semites. I mean, they truly are. They're out there screaming for the Intifada, screaming from the river to the sea, the wiping out of Israel. Some are chanting one state solution, meaning Israel goes away, just to Palestine. I mean, it's right on the nose. They hate Jews, and they're displaying their Jew hatred openly and without embarrassment. To see them put their fake blood all over the gates to the White House is absolutely disgusting. To see them get anywhere near Lady Liberty. You know who shares the values that Lady Liberty stands for? Israel. Israel stands with us when it comes to those issues, not Hamas, not the Palestinians. They don't know what they're talking about.
If they changed the word about Jews to African Americans and they said the same things they're saying on college campuses, the students would be booted. If they were caught carrying tiki torches as opposed to, as you say, fake blood and all the rest of it, they'd be booted off campus. Why is the institutional response of America not to come down on those that are calling for the death of others because of their race?
Well, I can defend that. That piece of it I can defend. You know, we've got this lovely thing called the First Amendment that doesn't allow the government to crack down on free speech that, you know, with only a sliver for an exception, may even be controversial. The First Amendment is there to prevent speech you do not like, including hate speech. Many people think that's unconstitutional. It's not. Hate speech is perfectly constitutional. Actual threats are not constitutional. Actual incitement to violence, and that's a very high bar, has to be incitement in the moment to go do it right now, and then the person likely does it. Then you're probably there. But just like we want to kill the Jews, that actually doesn't rise to the level. I mean, it doesn't. So you're allowed to say hateful things. However, that does not require any employer to hire you. It doesn't require a law firm to keep your job offer extended to you. It would be like saying, well, I saw you out there with your KKK hat on saying, well, the blacks deserved it. You know, I did it, but the blacks deserved it. You know, I have to contextualize my lynchings. I don't have to hire you, okay? And we don't have to hire the people out there saying, you've got to contextualize the Palestinians cutting heads off and burning children. You know, it's like, they kind of were asking for it. They're asking for it's a hard no. No.
Tell us about a horrible injury that a female hockey player has received while her team was playing a game, and why biological men are playing such a violent sport against women.
So this happened in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which is one of the most liberal states in the union. And it was on a field hockey team at the high school level in which a boy was playing on the girls' team. And because Massachusetts has its own equal rights amendment statewide, it requires that any child of one gender can play on the opposite gender's sports team if there's not a separate sports team for that person. And that's what happened. He whipped that ball so hard with his field hockey stick that it completely took out this girl's face. She had to be hospitalized with serious injuries. It wasn't like she lost a tooth or two, though she did. She had serious facial injuries that landed her in the hospital. They said the looks on the girls' faces were absolutely blood curdling. And now these parents are looking around saying, how did you allow this to happen? This is the reason why in most sane states, they won't allow boys this position.
Absolutely. We love you, Megyn. More of our chat is up at skynews.com.au, along with all of our highlights up on YouTube as well. So watch the telly, check us out online, and we'll see you after the break. Remember the old song, A Little Ray of Sunshine in the Shape of a Girl? Well, a big ray of sunshine into some beautiful friends of mine has just joined us. Welcome to the world, Isabella Slater. You're gorgeous. You've hit the jackpot with Mum and Dad in Paul and Mariana. She's going to have a wonderful life. She's just as gorgeous as her mum. She's just as awesome as her dad. And I'm sure they're both very pleased that she's born in New South Wales, not Queensland. So she's going to go for the Blues in Origin.